Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are diving into something really fascinating, a comprehensive and honestly pretty massive blueprint for fundamentally restructuring society. We're looking at the Progressive Liberty Party's framework, and what it does is it attempts to completely redefine how civil society operates. It shifts the whole core paradigm away from raw power and instead moves it towards strict codified service. Let's get right into it.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll cover the legacy power flaw, inverting the power pyramid, the 12-step framework, cognitive sovereignty and AI, restructuring the economy, and finally, a blueprint for reform.
Part 1. The legacy power flaw.
So think about our founding documents for a second. They clearly outline what the government can do, right, and what it cannot do. But notice what's missing there. They never actually define what the government absolutely must do. The source text argues that without a codified mandate of service to the people as the foundational rule, the system is left structurally vulnerable. It inevitably just devolves into a tug-of-war for power. Now, to really understand the fix they're proposing, look at this geometric contrast. It's like a giant puzzle. On the left, you've got the legacy system, your traditional pyramid. You have your kings, your rulers, basically all the consolidated power right at that tiny point on top, and it's all resting on the broad base of the people at the bottom. But the PLP framework? It radically flips this. In their system, you have an inverted pyramid. The broad base of sovereign people sits right at the top, and that tiny point at the bottom? That represents the executive servants.
Part 2. Inverting the power pyramid.
So in this inverted system, authority only flows one way. It delegates downward from the people to their servants. That is absolutely crucial. Structurally, this is designed to prevent the concentration of power. The clearly expressed group conscience, meaning you, me, our communities, remains the ultimate sovereign authority at the very top. We are only delegating limited, revocable tasks downward.
Which brings us to plank 7, also known as the inverted sovereignty. Under this rule, you, the citizen, are explicitly redefined as the executive. The president? Well, they're merely the administrator, literally the lowest servant on that inverted pyramid. By stripping public officials of inherent power, their authority becomes entirely revocable by the public at any time. A real game changer.
Part 3. The 12-step framework. To actually build this out, the framework borrows its core mechanics from a highly unexpected, yet totally battle-tested source. We're talking about the 12 steps, 12 traditions, and 12 concepts of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, stripped of its recovery context, this 12-12-12 framework has survived for decades without centralized wealth, without a police force, and without a coercive hierarchy. So the platform uses this exact mechanic as an incredibly resilient, decentralized operating system for civil statecraft.
Take Plank 22, for example. Instead of a traditional police force built on punitive authority, the system uses what they call Service Audit Bureaus, or SABs. Their mandate isn't violence. It's strictly to observe, document, and transparently audit the social contract. They operate kind of like an institutional immune system. They publish failures to an open ledger to automatically trigger systemic repair.
Part 4. Cognitive sovereignty and AI. Let's see how this translates into the digital age.
Okay, so in our modern digital age, the PLP places a massive emphasis on what they call cognitive sovereignty. Plank 168 mandates raw mode access. This means algorithms absolutely cannot covertly filter or manipulate your information feed. No way. The only strict, narrow exceptions where suppression is allowed are for extreme, mass casualty events. Think real-time orchestration of kinetic attacks, weapons of mass destruction, or engineered pathogens. Otherwise, no speech can be suppressed.
Because national-scale AI models are treated as public utilities here, there is a hard structural defense against algorithms hijacking the public square. Crucially, no automated censorship may occur without due process and court oversight. Executives and developers could even face personal liability for political speech suppression or unauthorized behavioral manipulation. It ensures your constitutional protections fully extend right into those AI-mediated spaces.
Part 5. Restructuring the economy. So this brings us to Plank 56, Adaptive Mutualism. This outlines a dual-mode economy. For discretionary goods, things like tech or retail, it relies on competitive markets where price signaling works perfectly. But for essential survival services, we're talking healthcare, baseline housing, utilities, it guarantees provision through public and cooperative means. Strict capital controls sit right at the boundary between the two, just to prevent speculative attacks on your essential needs.
To maintain this balance, the platform introduces two really interesting specific mechanisms. First, Harburger taxation. This prevents the hoarding of systemic assets like vacant commercial real estate, basically forcing honest price discovery. Second, it uses quadratic funding for public utilities. This mathematically favors the sheer number of everyday citizens backing a project over raw dollars from wealthy entities. It's designed specifically to prevent Sybil manipulation, where someone creates fake identities to game the system.
Part 6. A Blueprint for Reform. The scope of this proposed restructuring is honestly massive. Under democratic reform, it mandates top 5 ranked choice voting and star voting to completely break political duopolies. Under natural resources, it does something wild. It actually grants legal personhood to major water sources, like the Ogallala Aquifer, allowing them to legally sue polluters directly. It's a totally expansive, iterative operating system.
And the system even scales up to global diplomacy. Plank 188 actually strips megacorporations of peer-to-peer diplomatic standing, legally classifying them as transnational infrastructure. This ensures global policy remains strictly a sovereign domain. Corporate lobbying is dragged out of those closed-door sessions with heads of state and forced into fully public, recorded regulatory hearings.
This whole framework challenges pretty much everything we know about power. We're just impartially laying out the source material here. But it definitely leaves us with a profound question. Is the world actually ready to completely invert the pyramid of power? Could a massive global society truly function with authority permanently delegated downward, operating solely on a codified mandate of service? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions and keep learning.